Dusk in the office district. On the 23rd floor of a high-rise building, Emily Clark was immersed in her final checks at a real estate office. On her desk lay photos of a house in a suburban residential area. Tomorrow, she was going to show the house to a young couple. They recently found out they were expecting their first child and decided to move from their cramped apartment to a house with a yard. Emily gazed at the photos, imagining the family that would live there. 32-year-old Emily is a veteran agent with 7 years in the real estate industry. Her specialty is selling homes for families, while her colleagues chase high commissions selling luxury condos downtown. Emily has focused on selling detached homes in the suburbs. Selling a home for a family means thinking about their future together. This belief has been important to her since she was a rookie. It's not just about selling a property, but about being part of the lives of the people who will live there. For Emily, this work meant more than just a job. In the office at dusk, Emily faced her computer screen, making final checks for tomorrow's viewing. Details of the property, information about nearby schools, the distance to parks, and the location of grocery stores. All this information was crucial for the family about to start living in the house. This room would be perfect for a baby's room. Emily smiled while looking at a photo of a small room on the second floor. Warm sunlight entered through the south-facing windows, and changing the wallpaper would make it a lovely nursery. Her smartphone rang. The display read Lucas. Emily's expression softened. It was from her boyfriend Lucas Gray, with whom she had been in a relationship for 2 years. "Are you going to be late today?" "Yes, but I'll be done soon." "Then, I'll wait for you at our usual restaurant." After ending the brief conversation, Emily hurried to finish the rest of her work. Her relationship with Lucas, a businessman, was going well. Sometimes he didn't understand her passion for her work, but he still acknowledged her earnest approach as very you. However, lately, she felt a slight coldness in his words. Especially in recent weeks, Emily began to sense a change. Lucas, who usually took her for drives on weekends, had started avoiding meeting her, citing "I'm busy with work." His responses on the phone seemed distracted. Even when they did meet, his mind seemed to be somewhere else. One Saturday afternoon, after finishing an open house in the suburbs, Emily watched a young family leave with smiles. She felt a sense of fulfillment. At that moment, her smartphone rang. It was Lucas. "I have something to talk about tonight. Meet me at the usual restaurant at 7. His tone was unusually formal. A sense of unease spread through Emily's heart. At the high-end restaurant, Lucas sat more upright than usual. As one of the heirs to Gray Family Holdings, he always attracted attention. "The company's policy is changing," Lucas began, pouring expensive wine into his glass. "From now on, we aim for more efficient management." Emily couldn't grasp what that meant. "We are considering revising our dealings with your real estate company." A warning went off in Emily's mind. Lucas' family's company was a major client of her real estate firm. "What do you mean by revising?" "It's business, Emily. There's no need to get emotional." Lucas' voice was as cold as ice. "Watching you lately, I think you're headed in the wrong direction. You're still focused on small family properties. You should be trying for bigger deals." Emily calmly retorted, "I am proud of my work fulfilling families' dreams." "That's what I'm talking about," Lucas chuckled bitterly. "You need to see reality. The world runs on money." At that moment, Emily realized maybe she had never truly seen the real Lucas during their 2 years together. Riding in luxury cars, wearing top brands, dining at the finest restaurants. That was his normal. Family happiness can be bought with money. Those words made Emily shiver. The man in front of her seemed like a different person from the Lucas she had loved. For me, family happiness can't be measured just in money. Is that so? Lucas said with a sarcastic smile. You've always been an idealist. It was dusk outside. The cityscape visible through the restaurant windows was bathed in orange light. Emily felt a deep divide between her and Lucas. As they were leaving, Lucas presented Emily with a box containing an expensive necklace. This is what I promised. Emily stared at the box. The gifts she once received with joy now felt empty. Thank you. As she took the box, Emily sensed for the first time a real challenge in her life. After the uncomfortable dinner with Lucas, Emily arrived home and organized her plans for tomorrow in her head. This job meant more to Emily than just buying and selling real estate. It was about shaping people's dreams, a crucial mission supporting family happiness. Despite being concerned about Lucas' words and behavior, she decided to focus on her work. On a peaceful autumn morning, Emily's desk held a contract she had spent 6 months building with a major client. Building a relationship with the Brown family wasn't easy. They were looking for a spacious house to live in with 3 generations to care for elderly parents, and Emily had visited them multiple times, listening to their detailed requests. Finally, you found the ideal house, haven't you? Last week, when the contract was settled, Mrs. Brown tearfully grasped Emily's hand. Today, the final contract review was scheduled. Emily arrived at the office early and was checking her emails when her boss, Jack Wilson, appeared. His expression was unusually stern. Emily, we need to talk. She was led to a conference room where she saw Lucas standing by the window, looking outside. When he turned around, there was no trace of his former kindness. About the Brown family, Jack began. It's been decided that they will be handled by Gray Family Holdings. Emily's mind went blank. What do you mean? It's a simple matter, Lucas opened his mouth. I've offered better terms. Business is all about results, right? Emily retorted with a trembling voice, but the trust I've built with that family. Trust? Lucas sneered. Why don't you see reality for once? In this world, it's only the numbers that matter. Be quiet. Emily couldn't help raising her voice. You just don't understand people's feelings. Emily. Jack's voice echoed in the conference room. That's disrespectful to Mr. Gray. At that moment, Emily understood everything. Jack couldn't ignore the wishes of Lucas' family and using their relationship. Lucas had taken away a valuable client. You better start understanding your position. Lucas's voice was cold as ice. You're not in my league, are you? Outside the window, leaves were swirling in the wind. Emily felt something inside her crumble away. Jack, Emily looked at her boss with a last hope. That family was my responsibility. I know all their hopes and fears. However, Jack averted his eyes. I'm sorry, Emily. This is a business decision. As Emily left the conference room, she caught Lucas' smug smile. It erased any semblance of the man she once loved. Back at her desk, Emily's smartphone rang. It was Mrs. Brown. Emily didn't have the courage to answer and let it go to voicemail. Emily. A trembling voice was recorded. Why, we trusted you. The calendar on her desk was filled with appointments for next week. But now, all of that seems meaningless. Emily quietly stood up and headed to the bathroom. She didn't want anyone to see her. The tears wouldn't stop. However, this was just the beginning. Unbeknownst to Emily, more trials were waiting for her. At the end of autumn, on a morning when a cold wind shook the last leaves on the street trees, Emily went to the office as usual. However, she noticed that the atmosphere in the office was different. Her colleagues looked at her differently. Everyone avoided eye contact and didn't speak to her. When she arrived at her desk, she realized her computer wouldn't start up. It seemed she had been logged out of the system. Confused, Emily was approached by Jack. "Could you come to my room?" Instead of the conference room, Emily was led to his office and noticed a document on his desk. It was a termination notice. "Lately, you've had too many troubles with clients," Jack said without looking away from the window. "Complaints from customers are also increasing. As a company, we can't afford to take any more risks." Troubles? Complaints? Emily couldn't believe her ears. "I've never had any complaints from my clients." "There's evidence," Jack pointed to an envelope on the desk. Inside were several letters of complaints from her clients. However, all the dates were recent, and the signatures were unfamiliar to Emily. "This isn't right," Emily tried to explain desperately. "All my clients have been satisfied." "That's enough," Jack's voice was cold. "You have 1 hour to clear your desk. Security will be present. But there's no point in discussing this further." Emily stood up and asked her last question with a trembling voice. "Is this Lucas Gray's doing?" For the first time, Jack looked Emily in the eye. A flicker of guilt passed across his face, but it quickly vanished. "The Gray family is an important client of our company. Please refrain from any further prying." Back at her desk, Emily was watched coldly by a young security officer. As she cleared her desk, which she had worked at for 7 years, she felt a sense of reality slipping away. Picture frames, diaries, calendars, files. She packed each item into a cardboard box. Each one was filled with memories. "It's time." Prompted by the security officer's voice, Emily put the last of her belongings into the box. As she closed the drawer of her desk, her eyes rested on a photograph. It was a commemorative photo from when the contract with the Brown family was finalized last month. The image of Mrs. Brown holding her hand with a smile brought tears to her eyes. On her way to the elevator, she passed a former friend. The friend looked remorseful but passed by without saying a word. "Why?" Emily stopped in the lobby, where the security officer pointed to the exit. Outside, a cold rain had begun to fall. Emily walked out of the company she had worked at for 7 years, holding the cardboard box. In the cold rain, Emily began to walk, still holding the cardboard box. In just 1 hour, she had lost the job that had been her identity for 7 years. The picture frames in the box were filled with smiles of numerous families she had helped build happy homes. Emily paused and looked through the rain-soaked picture frames one by one. Families smiling happily in front of their new homes. An elderly couple who had thanked her on moving day. A young couple she had discussed nursery interiors with. "I'm no longer a real estate agent." Her own voice sounded as if it belonged to someone else. For years, she had proudly considered herself a real estate agent supporting family happiness. That pride, like the cold rain, had now washed away. People passing on the street stared curiously at her, holding the cardboard box. Emily clutched the box tightly. Its contents were her life itself. But now, that life was beginning to crumble. A week after being fired, Emily logged into her online banking to check her savings balance. The number on the screen shocked her. 6 months ago, Lucas had proposed an investment for our future together. "Would you let me manage your savings in my investment account?" At the time, Lucas had looked very sincere. "The stock market is in a great state right now. With my family's company, we can definitely make a profit. For our future together, please consider it." At first, Emily hesitated. But his words about living in a nicer house, if they married someday, filled her with hope. Ultimately, she decided to entrust most of her savings to Lucas. Now, that decision has greatly disrupted her life. She picked up her smartphone and dialed Lucas's new number, which she had obtained from a coworker. After several rings, the call finally connected. "What happened to the money I invested?" Lucas on the other end was cold, like a stranger. "Oh, that insignificant amount is long gone." "Insignificant?" "That was my life savings. You agreed to the investment voluntarily, right? It's your responsibility." The call was abruptly disconnected. That night, Emily opened her credit card statement with trembling hands. Unbelievable figures were listed: luxury boutiques, jewelry stores, high-end restaurants. Huge payments had been made without her knowledge. It all happened a few months ago when she went shopping with Lucas. "I'll pay with your card. I'll reimburse you the full amount later." Saying that, he used her card for expensive purchases. Of course, he never kept his promise to refund her. Emily immediately contacted the credit card company, but the response was cold. "The transactions were made using your card details and password. If you disclosed this information to a third party, it is not considered fraudulent use." The night deepened. The lights of the city seen from her apartment window gradually became blurred. Emily stared at the spread-out bills and statements on her desk, trying to accept the reality. Her savings were gone, her credit card was burdened with huge payments. She had lost her job, and the rent was due. The fridge was nearly empty. She awoke to the sound of cold rain tapping on the window, signaling the arrival of winter. Inside her blanket, Emily curled up. Lately, she felt lethargic and had been running a low fever. "I need to find a job," she muttered as she turned on her smartphone. She had already been rejected several times for re-employment in the real estate industry. Lucas's influence was larger than expected, and malicious rumors about her had spread throughout the industry. She causes problems with clients. There are issues with her complaint handling. She lacks reliability. The rumors she heard from former coworkers pierced her heart. One morning, as she was about to go for an interview at a supermarket, Emily nearly collapsed from severe nausea. She tried to leave the house regardless. But as soon as she started down the stairs, everything went dark. And she found herself lying on her bed. The clock already pointed to the afternoon. She had completely missed the interview time. "Why is my body?" Her smartphone rang. There were already 3 missed calls. They were from her landlord. This month's rent was overdue. She couldn't muster the courage to answer. Emily burrowed back into her blanket. Late that night, a knock on the door echoed. "Ms. Clark, please open up." It was the landlord's voice. Emily slowly opened the door. About this month's rent, the landlord looked at her coldly. "When do you plan to pay?" "Just a little more time." "I heard the same last month," the landlord sighed. "If you can't pay by the end of this week, you'll need to leave." Emily faced the eviction notice flipping in front of her. The landlord had already consulted a lawyer. What Emily learned later was that Lucas had also been pressuring the landlord. From the next day, Emily desperately searched for a job. However, her physical condition continued to deteriorate. Even when trying to go for interviews, she was suddenly overcome with drowsiness or nausea, missed trains, or arrived late. "I'm sorry. My health." Every time she made excuses, the interviewer's looks turned colder. A week later, Emily was packing the bare minimum of her belongings into a suitcase. Large furniture and sentimental items had to be discarded. She picked up the last remaining photo frame. It was a memory with her parents. She hadn't contacted them. Out of shame, she didn't have the courage to tell them about her current situation. "I'm sorry." Emily handed the keys to the landlord. When she stepped out into the blustery street, she didn't know where to go. Dragging her suitcase, she started walking slowly. The first night was spent in a 24-hour cafe. The second night on a bench at the bus terminal. The third night, her memory became hazy. Her body felt heavy. The nausea wouldn't subside. Yet, she couldn't ask anyone for help. Pride got in the way. Or perhaps, more frightening was the fear that even if she asked for help, no one would reach out to her. Through the cold night streets, Emily continued walking. The wheels of her suitcase made a feeble sound on the asphalt. As she passed the houses she had once sold, the sight of families living in warm light tightened her heart even more. On a wintry night covered in powder snow, Emily was wrapped in cardboard in an alley near the station. A month had passed, and her possessions had gradually decreased. Most of the contents of her suitcase had been sold bit by bit at a second-hand clothes shop to stave off hunger. What remained were a few changes of clothes and photos from when she worked as a real estate agent. Each time she looked at the photos. In this month, Emily had learned the underside of the city. Places in 24-hour cafes where she could stay until morning. Public restrooms in libraries that were open late at night. Relatively safe alleys out of sight of security cameras. However, her physical strength was nearing its limit. That night too, Emily shivered in the darkness of the alley. Snow accumulated on her shoulders, and the freezing cold penetrated to her core. Suddenly, voices came from across the street. From the entrance of the upscale restaurant La Maison, Lucas appeared. He was dressed perfectly, seemingly unaffected by the cold. Following him was Catherine Winters. She was wrapped in a pure white mink coat, her neckline glittering with large diamond necklaces. "What a lovely evening." Catherine's voice carried through the cold night air. "You deserve only the best." Lucas whispered in her ear as he opened the door to a luxury car. Emily hid in the shadows of the alley. The kind voice and smile that had once been directed at her, was it all an act? The two of them got into the car arm in arm. The car's headlights cut through the darkness and quietly drove away. Emily watched their retreating figures as she shivered. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She hugged her body with both arms. Lately, her health had not been good. Nausea and fatigue continued. And she often suffered from dizziness. A cold wind swept through the alley as Emily wrapped herself in cardboard, reflecting on her circumstances. Just a few months ago, she was enjoying meals in upscale restaurants. Now, she shivered on the streets. As the night deepened, the hustle and bustle of the city gradually faded, and the street regained its silence. Emily hugged her knees, shivering in the cold as she awaited dawn. reassuring herself that tomorrow would be a better day. With that thought, she closed her eyes. Somewhere in the city, Lucas and Catherine were likely sleeping in a warm bed. In a luxury apartment. Enduring the cold and hunger. Emily reminisced about a past she could never return to. The next morning, curled up behind a cafe, Emily was barely able to walk due to ongoing nausea and dizziness. Each time the cold wind blew through the alley, she shivered wrapped in her cardboard. At 7 a.m., the cafe's back door opened. And a female staff member in her mid-30s came out with a trash bag. As she was about to throw the bag into the bin, she noticed Emily crouched down. "Are you okay?" Emily didn't have the energy to respond and just trembled. The staff member quickly went back inside the cafe and returned shortly with warm coffee and a sandwich. "Please eat." At the kind voice, Emily looked up. There was pure compassion in the clerk's eyes. Having not had a warm meal in days, Emily reached for the sandwich offered to her. However, as soon as she took a bite, intense nausea overwhelmed her. She rushed to the corner of the alley and vomited everything she had just eaten. "Are you?" The employee's voice grew even gentler. "Could you be pregnant?" Those words snapped Emily back to reality. Indeed, the changes in her body over the past few weeks, the morning sickness, extreme fatigue, and dizziness all pointed to one possibility. As the words were about to leave her lips, another wave of nausea hit her. The employee quickly supported Emily and sat her down against the alley wall. "There's a free clinic nearby. You can get tested there." The employee took a notepad out of her apron pocket and began writing down the address. "There's also a shelter for women nearby." Emily took the note with trembling hands. Was the blurriness in her vision due to the tears? Why would you help someone like me?" "Everyone needs help sometimes," the employee answered quietly. "I've had my hard times, too. Back then, a stranger's kindness saved me." In the cold alley, Emily felt the warmth of human kindness for the first time. "Come back anytime. I'm here most weekdays," the employee said kindly before returning inside the cafe. The aroma of warm coffee lingered in the alley. Emily stared at the note in her hand, deep in thought. Pregnancy. The possibility ignited a massive anxiety in her heart, but also a flicker of hope. Should she go to the shelter? Should she get tested at the clinic? She had avoided relying on anyone until now. The next morning, Emily stood in front of the free clinic. The sign on the faded building read "Community Free Clinic." Her hands trembled as she opened the door, the smell of disinfectant overwhelming her. The waiting room was already crowded. Elderly people coughing, babies crying. Young people with vacant stares, all dressed in shabby clothes. Crammed into a small space. Emily gave her name at the reception and took a questionnaire. Then sat on a hard plastic chair by the wall, flanked by strangers. Every time someone coughed loudly, anxious glances were thrown around. In a corner of the waiting room, a clearly ill man sat on the floor. No one approached him, only occasionally did a nurse speak to him. Emily instinctively shrank back. Was she being viewed the same way? 3 hours passed. Finally, her name was called, and she was led to the examination room. A woman doctor in her late 50s greeted her tiredly. "You look unwell," the doctor spoke softly. "What brings you here?" Emily explained her symptoms of the past few weeks: nausea, fatigue, dizziness. The doctor nodded silently throughout the examination. "The test results are in," the doctor began quietly. "You are pregnant." The words seemed to come from far away to Emily's ears. What should I do? Emily's voice trembled. The doctor gently took her hand. What's your living situation? At that question, Emily choked up. Living on the streets. The cold. Hunger. She revealed everything, and the doctor's expression turned to worry. This is dangerous for both you and the baby, the doctor said earnestly. Let me refer you to a shelter. Noise from the waiting room filtered through the door. Emily shook her head. The thought of living in a place like the waiting room terrified her. The homeless shelter must be even worse. Seeing her reaction, the doctor asked, Do you have anyone in the city you can turn to? No one. I have no one to rely on, Emily replied in a barely audible voice. The doctor took a letter of referral from her desk. Why don't you take this letter and go to the shelter? Think of your baby at least. Snow began to fall outside the window. Emily stared at the referral letter, undecided. To freeze on the streets, or to spend anxious nights among strangers? Either choice seemed to promise only darkness. A few days after leaving the clinic, Emily continued her life on the streets. But as the cold intensified and her health deteriorated, she clutched the doctor's referral letter, worn from being handled so often. One evening, Emily made up her mind. It might be dangerous to continue like this. The doctor's words echoed in her head. For the baby's sake at least. The shelter was housed in a renovated old church, marked by a sign that read Hope Harbor Women's Shelter. However, a long line had already formed in front of it. Shivering in the cold wind, the sight of the people waiting made Emily hesitate for a moment. I'm sorry, a weary staff member announced. We can only take in a limited number of people today. A sigh of anxiety escaped from the line. In front of Emily stood an elderly woman, clad only in a thin jacket, shivering as she waited her turn. I've been turned away for 3 days already. The old woman muttered to no one in particular. And it looks like it's going to be another cold night. As the evening grew colder, Emily clutched the letter of referral and slowly moved forward. Yet, one by one, the people ahead of her were turned away. We can't take any more people today. Please come back tomorrow morning. We prioritize those in the most urgent need. The staff's voice carried on the cold wind. When it was almost Emily's turn, a voice announced, We are no longer accepting people for today. Despair washed over her. Emily leaned into a corner of the alley, resting her forehead against the cold wall. The referral letter from the doctor was now crumpled. The line in front of the shelter gradually dispersed. Those left behind vanished into the night, each seeking their own refuge. Emily, too, started walking unsteadily, thinking of the child in her belly. The anxiety of spending another night on the streets overwhelmed her. Emily walked slowly down the street, swept by the cold wind. Another cold night was about to begin. The next day, after being turned away from the shelter, Emily was back in the same place. With no other refuge in this cold, she huddled in a corner of the shelter, praying that tonight she would be let in. Oh my, could it be? Lifting her head at the kind voice, Emily saw a woman around 60 years old looking at her with concern. A familiar face. But in her memory, this person was in a different place, under different circumstances. Emily? Ms. Emily Clark, is that you? Suddenly, Emily's memories came flooding back. 3 years ago, a family needed a home near the hospital for their son who required treatment. Emily had visited numerous times, searching tirelessly until she found a property that met their needs. Mrs. Bennett, Emily's voice trembled. Yes, Mary Bennet. The woman smiled warmly. I'm glad you remember me. You were so helpful back then. We needed to move quickly for my son Adam's treatment. And you were so dedicated to finding us the right place. Mary paused, taking in Emily's appearance. Gone was the poised real estate agent. Now, before her was a woman thin and worn out, bringing a shadow of sadness to Mary's eyes. Why are you here? Emily was at a loss for words. She couldn't muster the courage to explain her dire situation to a former client. However, Mary gently took her hand. The warm hand in a glove enveloped Emily's frozen fingers. Come to my home. What? Come with me. It's going to be cold tonight. Emily shook her head. But you worked so hard for our family back then. Mary's voice was firm. Now it's my turn to do something for you. In the biting wind, tears spilled from Emily's eyes. Mary silently offered her a handkerchief and began to help with Emily's belongings. I volunteer here. It's going to get cold tonight. And they might not let people in because it's so crowded. So you should stay at my place. Emily hesitated, but the sincere kindness in Mary's eyes reminded her of her own determination when she had worked as a real estate agent, putting family's happiness first. Thank you. Emily's voice was hoarse. Let's go. My husband, Robert, and my son, Adam, will be happy to see you. With Mary's support, Emily stood up, feeling the kindness she had once given returning to her in an unexpected form. As dusk fell on the winter day, they slowly walked towards Mary's home. Mary's house was a single-family home in a quiet residential area. Colorful flowers planted in the small front yard bloomed bravely against the winter chill. When Mary opened the front door, warm air enveloped Emily's chilled cheeks. I'm home, Mary called out. And I have a guest. Welcome back, a warm male voice echoed. Robert emerged from the living room. He was a robust man, his physique belying his age of 68. Well, if it isn't Emily. It had been since the move 3 years ago that they last met. Robert's gentle smile was just as she remembered. Use the shower, Mary nudged Emily gently. I'll prepare some clothes for you. The scent of clean towels. The warmth of the shower. For the first time in months, Emily enjoyed a long, warm shower. The clothes Mary provided were soft and cozy. Returning to the living room, Emily found the table set for dinner. Homemade pot roast with potatoes and carrots arranged colorfully around the meat. Adam will be back soon, Mary said as she served warm soup. It all seemed like a dream. Clean tablecloths, the smell of a warm meal. And above all, the sounds of family chatter. Emily felt overwhelmed, unsure if she belonged here. Please, eat, Mary's voice was soft. Don't hold back. At that moment, the front door opened. I'm home, a young man's voice announced. It was Adam. He used to work for a major IT company, Robert reminisced. Now he's found his own path as a freelancer. Adam, 31, had switched to freelancing at home after recovering from severe pneumonia 3 years ago. This career change allowed him to work at his own pace, and he seemed to enjoy his new lifestyle. As they gathered around the dinner table, the Bennet family naturally included Emily in their conversation. Their unobtrusive kindness eased her tension. Would you stay with us in exchange for helping around the house? After dinner, Mary broached a subject. Emily was speechless. Mary continued. Use the guest room upstairs. It's yours. We feel safer having someone else around. But Emily hesitated. I don't want to impose. Not at all, Robert reassured her gently. Mary's always right. Adam also nodded kindly. That night, for the first time in a long time, Emily slept in a clean bed. Snow quietly fell outside the window. Inside the warm room, she placed a hand on her belly. It's going to be okay. Mary's voice echoed in her ears. Life can be restarted. Emily fell asleep peacefully for the first time in 3 months. She did not yet know that a new chapter of her life was about to begin in this home. A week into her stay at Mary's house, Emily looked at her with concern. You haven't had your regular checkup yet, have you? While folding clothes, Mary spoke gently. Emily silently nodded. There's a good gynecologist nearby, a doctor I know. I've made an appointment for you this afternoon. Emily looked up in surprise. Mary's meticulous care felt just like that of a real mother. That afternoon, accompanied by Mary, Emily visited the hospital. The waiting room was bathed in warm sunlight, with trees visible through the large windows and baby photos hung on the walls. I've heard about you from Mrs. Bennet, the middle-aged female doctor smiled gently. Shall we proceed with the examination? Lying on the examination table, Emily tensed up with nerves. But Mary held her hand beside her. The ultrasound started. Oh. The doctor's voice paused momentarily. Is something wrong? Emily's voice trembled. Congratulations. You're having twins. Emily gasped. The screen clearly showed 2 tiny lives. Twins. Tears streamed down Emily's cheeks. Twins, in my condition. Her voice trembled as she spoke, and Mary squeezed her hand reassuringly. It's okay. We're here for you. The doctor continued to explain carefully, everything is progressing well. But twin pregnancies require careful monitoring. Let's make sure you have regular checkups. Leaving the examination room, Emily slumped down on a bench in the hospital corridor. Mary sat down beside her. I'm scared. Emily whispered. It's hard enough alone, but twins. You're not alone, Mary said quietly. Me, Robert, and Adam, we're all here to support you. The afternoon sunlight warmed the 2 of them through the hospital window. Life has unexpected gifts, Mary smiled warmly. They may feel like burdens at times, but the joy they bring is just as great. On the way home, Emily placed her hand on her stomach. 2 lives. Amidst her mixed feelings of anxiety and hope, she was determined to raise these children well. That night, the Bennet family's dinner table was wrapped in an even warmer atmosphere. When Mary shared the news about the twins, Robert smiled gently, and Adam nodded kindly. It must be fate, Mary murmured while cleaning up after the meal. A wonderful future awaits us. The cold winter passed, and by the time the winds of spring began, Emily's belly had grown noticeably. Mary carefully planned daily meals with balanced nutrition, while Robert helped clear out an old children's room during breaks from gardening. Adam had converted a spare room into a nursery, saying, My job allows me to be home, so I can help any time. Sometimes Emily felt overwhelmed by her happiness, unsure if she deserved it. During those times, Mary would always say gently, You are a part of our family. One summer morning, Emily was suddenly hit by labor pains, 2 weeks ahead of her due date. It's okay, I've called an ambulance. Mary's calm voice supported Emily, who was near panic. At the hospital, the labor continued. due to the risk of premature birth. The doctors carefully monitored her. Mary held Emily's hand throughout, providing immense comfort. "Mom." The words slipped out unintentionally from Emily's mouth, and tears glistened in Mary's eyes. "I'm right here." After 12 hours of labor, the first baby, a healthy boy, was born. "It's a healthy boy," announced the doctor. 30 minutes later, the second baby, a girl, arrived. The cries of the newborns filled the room. Though smaller than expected, the twins were healthy. "We'll name them Oliver and Audrey," Emily announced with a tired smile. "Lovely names." Mary nodded. As evening fell, the hospital room was bathed in the light of a summer sunset. Emily held her babies, feeling an indescribable emotion. Just months ago, she was freezing on the streets, and now she was the mother of two. Mary whispered, "You did well. But this is just the beginning." Emily nodded. There was uncertainty, yes, but she was no longer alone. The Bennett family was always by her side, making her feel that she could overcome any difficulty. The hospital room was filled with the breath of new life, signaling the start of a new family. It was a morning 2 months after the twins were born. Emily had just put Oliver and Audrey to sleep and was making tea in the kitchen with Mary. The morning news program was playing on the TV. And in our next news segment, the announcer began. "It has been announced that the heir to Gray Family Holdings, Mr. Lucas Gray, and businesswoman Ms. Catherine Winters will be married tomorrow at the Central Hotel." Emily's hand froze. The screen displayed smiling photos of Lucas and Catherine, with footage of a press conference at a luxury hotel rolling in succession. "The marriage of the two is important for the industry," the announcer continued. "Emily," Mary said with concern. Emily slowly set down her mug. Her hand was trembling slightly. From the baby room, she could hear the soft breathing of little Oliver. "Those people, they don't know who their father is." Emily's voice was quiet but filled with resolve. "We need to let everyone know the truth." Mary listened silently to Emily's words. "The twins are Lucas's children. He has a right to know. And I have a duty to tell the truth." "Do you really want to do this?" Mary asked carefully. "You have the right, but are you ready?" Emily looked out the window. The sky was clear, as if pushing her to make her decision. "For the children," Emily said quietly. "I want them to move forward knowing the truth, rather than living a lie." Mary stood up, removing her apron. "Then, let's get ready." "What? Are you going to the wedding?" Mary smiled. Emily's eyes widened in surprise. "Mary, you're not opposed?" "Your determination is right," Mary said kindly. "Speaking the truth sometimes takes courage, but it's the right thing to do. It's better for the children, and for you." Tears appeared in Emily's eyes. Since coming to the Bennett household, how many times had she been encouraged and supported like this? "Thank you. Let's go upstairs," Mary said cheerfully. "Tell me what dress you want to wear to make your stand." They walked upstairs. From the baby room, the twins' breathing could be heard. Emily took a deep breath. This wasn't just about revenge. It was an important step for her children's future. In front of the chapel at the Central Hotel, Emily took a deep breath. She had chosen to wear the green dress she wore during her difficult homeless days. Now tattered. It was the outfit she was wearing when she reunited with Mary. Washed but imbued with deep memories. There were elegant silk dresses that Mary had worn long ago. But Emily wanted to show how much she had struggled to protect. and give birth to her children by wearing the green dress from her homeless days. As if it was the day she was rescued by Mary. She dirted parts of the washed dress with shoe polish. She didn't fix her hair or wear makeup. She wanted to show herself as she had survived on the streets. Oliver and Audrey were dressed in simple white clothes chosen by Mary. Both were unaware of what was about to happen, breathing calmly in Emily's arms. "Are you ready?" Mary asked quietly. She had come to accompany Emily and the twins. Emily nodded silently. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes held firm resolve. The wedding march began to play inside the chapel. The ceremony was about to start. Emily hugged the twins tightly and showed a moment of hesitation to Mary. "Is this really the right thing to do?" "The children have a right to know the truth," Mary encouraged her gently. "And you have the courage to tell it." The large doors opened. Emily stepped forward with determination into the chapel. The venue was decorated lavishly. White roses lined the aisle, and chandeliers cast elegant light. The guests seated inside turned around all at once. At the altar, Lucas and Catherine stood frozen with surprise. Catherine's pure white wedding dress gleamed in the light. "Who is that? Is she homeless? Are those children?" Whispers spread across the venue. Emily walked slowly forward. The twins seemed to sense the atmosphere and remained quiet. "Long time no see, Lucas," Emily's voice echoed in the chapel. "I have come here to tell the truth." Lucas's face turned pale. He looked at the twins in Emily's arms, and his expression froze. Oliver looked exactly like Lucas did as a baby. "The father of these children," Emily said calmly yet firmly, "is the groom, Lucas Gray." The hall buzzed. Camera flashes started popping. Journalists began taking notes. "It's a lie," Catherine screamed. "Who would believe such a farce?" "A DNA test will clarify the truth," Emily responded coolly. Lucas stood speechless. His parents stood up from the front row with shocked expressions. "These children have the right to know their origins," Emily continued. "And you have a responsibility as a father." Silence took over the venue. Then, little Audrey woke up and smiled innocently, resembling the young version of Lucas's mother. "My children?" Lucas's voice shook. "Is there proof?" "You know it best. And you also know what you put me through," Emily answered calmly. The venue was filled with confusion. Camera flashes continued, and whispers swirled around. Catherine trembled with rage, and Lucas stood pale-faced. The truth could no longer be hidden. "This wedding is off." Catherine's scream echoed through the venue. "How dare you embarrass me like this, the worst." She clutched her wedding dress and ran down from the altar. Lucas's parents stood up from the front row, especially his mother, whose expression was stern. Indeed, her grandson resembled her son. "Lucas," his mother's voice was low. "Explain this." "It's not true." Lucas stammered. "They can't be my children. It's impossible." At that moment, Oliver awoke. Perhaps startled by the noise of the venue, he began to cry loudly. Soon, Audrey also woke up and started crying along with her brother. Their cries echoed through the grand chapel. The photographers' cameras flashed incessantly. Guests pulled out their smartphones to start recording. The wedding had descended into complete chaos. "I demand a DNA test," Emily stated calmly. "It's for the children's rights." As the venue staff scurried about, Catherine's father stood up. A major figure in the investment industry, his face was filled with unprecedented anger. "Let's go, Catherine," he said, taking his daughter's hand, attempting to leave the venue. "Wait." "Catherine." Lucas hurried after them, but stopped in his tracks under Catherine's cold gaze. Emily bowed deeply and then, holding the twins, she walked resolutely out of the chapel. Mary was waiting outside. "Let's go," Mary said gently. "You did what you had to do." The two quietly left the hotel. Behind them, the chaos continued inside the chapel. But that was no longer Emily's concern. She had spoken her truth for her children and for herself. That evening, videos of the wedding circulated on the internet. Lucas Gray's name began to whisper through the business world. Once praised as a capable successor, his reputation plummeted overnight. Gray family holdings stock price tumbled. The business partnership with the Winters family was annulled. But these were no longer Emily's concerns. That night, in the Bennett family's living room, Emily, holding the twins, said to Mary, "Finally, it's over." Mary nodded kindly. "Now, you can start a new life." Outside the window, the summer stars shone quietly. Emily gazed at her children, her resolve for the future renewed. 6 months after the twins were born, Emily had just finished preparing their baby food in the Bennett family's living room. The TV news reported on a restructuring of Gray family holdings. "Emily, can I have a moment?" Adam appeared in the living room during a break from work. "There's an interesting trend in the real estate industry," he began, opening his laptop. "Online property listings are becoming mainstream, with companies offering virtual tours before actual viewings." Emily looked interestedly at the screen. Indeed, the industry had transformed since she had worked in it. With smartphones and computers, one could virtually tour properties as if physically there. "This way," Adam continued, "you don't need a large office or expensive equipment to start a real estate brokerage. With your experience and my IT knowledge combined." Just then, Mary emerged from the kitchen. "I have a good idea too." She sat down at the living room table and pulled out an envelope. "This is part of my retirement fund. I'd like you to use it to fund the new business." "But..." Emily hesitated. "It's an investment," Mary smiled. "An investment in your talent. Plus, we have a young IT expert right here." Adam nodded happily. "I'll support all the technical aspects." Emily thought quietly. Indeed, her experience in real estate was her strength. And importantly, her belief in selling homes for family happiness had not changed. "Let's start small," Adam suggested. "First, use our home as an office and expand online operations. It should keep costs down." "I can help too," Mary added. "Leave the administrative tasks to me." Emily looked out the window. Oliver and Audrey were playing in the garden, watched over by Robert. In this house, she had found a new family. And now, it seemed, a new business was about to begin. "Let's do it," Emily decided. Preparations began that day. Adam started designing the website, and Emily used her past experience to plan online property listings. Mary helped with paperwork, and Robert looked after the twins. New Beginnings Real Estate. Emily had chosen the name. A new start, not just for the property buyers, but for herself as well. From now on, Emily whispered, holding the twins, "We can all walk this new path together." Please take a look at the kitchen. Emily holds a compact camera and meticulously films the interior of the property. Using a special app developed by Adam, Viewers could navigate through the property virtually, using their smartphones or computers as if they were walking through the house themselves. From the south-facing windows, plenty of sunlight pours in. It seems like it could make housework enjoyable. After finishing the filming, Emily quickly sent the data to Adam, who would edit it for posting on the website. Mary watched their coordinated efforts with a satisfied smile. New Beginnings Real Estate had gained a reputation just 6 months after opening. In an era where virtual property tours had become the norm, Emily's detailed property introductions and Adam's technical skills had matched perfectly. The office phone rang, and Emily picked up the receiver. New Beginnings Real Estate. It's been a while, Emily. Upon hearing the voice from the other end of the phone, Emily momentarily lost her words. It was Lucas Gray. Since the incident at the wedding, Gray Family Holdings had been struggling, and Lucas had been ousted from the core of the company. His voice no longer carried its former arrogance. I'm considering selling a villa. Would your company handle it? Emily took a deep breath. I'm sorry. We cannot accept that. Wait, Lucas's voice became anxious. I don't care about the price. And it's also about the children. The children will be my responsibility. Emily's voice was calm but resolute. I expect nothing from you. After a brief silence, Lucas sighed. Understood. I'm sorry. The moment she hung up, Emily felt a weight lift from her chest. There was no longer any need to be bound by the past. You did well. Mary smiled warmly. Just then, laughter from the twins could be heard from the garden. They could now walk on their own. Oliver was picking a small flower to give to Audrey, watched over gently by Robert. Our office, Emily said, looking out the window. I want it to be a place that supports women facing difficulties. Mary listened intently. Like I once was, women struggling with housing. I especially want to focus on supporting single mothers. That's a wonderful idea. Mary's eyes lit up. We'll help however we can. Adam nodded. Let's create a dedicated page on the website. We can include property listings for single mothers and information about support programs. Emily felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She had met this family, started a new job, and now she had found a way to help others. Everything was moving towards a new beginning. On a warm spring day inside the office, Emily was speaking with a young mother sitting next to her 4-year-old daughter. The rent is affordable and it's close to the station, but... The young mother hesitated. I don't have a guarantor. It's okay, Emily smiled gently. Our support program allows you to sign a lease without a guarantor. New Beginnings Real Estate had established a division specializing in housing assistance for single mothers. The Real Estate Support for Women in Need initiative, which Mary and Emily started together, was now well known in the city. I was once in your position. At Emily's words, the young mother looked up in surprise. But I was able to get here because I met people who reached out with a helping hand. Just then, the office door burst open, and the twins charged in energetically. Fresh from kindergarten. Now 4 years old, Oliver and Audrey often stopped by their mother's workplace. Adam followed behind with a gentle smile. Mommy. Audrey excitedly showed off a drawing she had made at kindergarten, a picture of her family. The young mother's daughter approached curiously, and soon the children were playing together in a corner of the office. You can always come to us for parenting advice, Emily continued. This place is more than a real estate office. It's a support center for those starting new lives. Adam's real estate search system was designed to easily check information about child-rearing environments and educational facilities. The online viewing system was highly appreciated by busy single mothers. "Thank you so much." Tears glistened in the young mother's eyes. That evening, as the family gathered in the garden, Mary happily spread out a newspaper. "Look, Emily. Our work is featured here." The article was titled "Innovative Real Estate Service and Social Contribution Achieved." "All thanks to everyone," Emily said gratefully, looking around at her family. In the garden, the twins were running around energetically. Last year, Emily and Adam had held a quiet wedding. Their love, which had blossomed unexpectedly, naturally led to marriage. Now, Adam was a wonderful father to the twins. "It's amazing," Mary smiled warmly. "When I first met you," Emily reminisced nostalgically. She had been trembling in front of a shelter then. But now it was different. She was engaged in real estate work again. But this time in a new way, not just selling houses, but truly supporting family happiness. "Mary," Emily said softly. "What is it?" "I've regained it. Or perhaps I've found it. A real family, a real place for myself and my identity." Mary nodded gently. "Yes, but it's the same for us too. The new bond with you and the twins. And Adam, it's the greatest happiness to see our family circle expand." As the evening sky turned a soft hue, the flowers in the garden swayed in the gentle breeze. After a challenging journey, Emily was truly fulfilling her mission of supporting family happiness. More than anything, she had secured her place as a cherished member of a warm family.